Hi guys, this video today I want to talk about shadow aspects. So shadow aspects are things that everybody has. They are things that we develop in order to survive and get our needs met in childhood. I also believe these are like, family patterns. You know, the way you live your life within your home can be very different than other people live their life in their home, and it can be things that have been normalized, but it's not something that you're going to be talking about outside of that environment. You know, it could be like, this is a butterfly outside my window. The things where it's like, they could have been acceptable and cute as a kid, but now as an adult, they're like not so cute. So this could be, when kids are cute and charming, but then like as an adult, like I've met men that are charming, but like they're only charming to get what they want from me in the way to use and abuse me. So they use that charm kind of like a politician to get what they want. Could be in numbers, could be in finances, but they're not actually doing the work, like the groundwork. They're not doing the internal work. It's just a way to get things, like the easier than actually doing the work themselves. They use charm to get people to give them things, right? And so some people grew up being charming as a child, so they use it to their benefit. And this could be like, people that grow up that have looks. Some people just get things given to them because they're attractive, and sometimes they'll use that, and sometimes you count on that, and you realize like you can't rely on your looks because nobody really cares sometimes. Like the right people are eventually like, just because you're attractive, if you're ugly on the inside, that doesn't take away that ugliness on the inside just because you're attractive. Now, some people are caught up with that sort of superficialness, right? And some people do rock with that. And to me, that shows like a real lack of in-depth traction, I guess, like the ability to go deeper and look more into people instead of like what they look like on the outside. And that's something I had to do because I was raised where certain people were prioritized, people in status. I know that my dad, like when we go to the grocery store, he would pull people over and just start talking to them, and I don't know who they were, and I don't remember now exactly if they were like, but like he would just pull them over and start talking to them. And it was kind of odd because I'm like, why are you doing that? Like because he would talk all the time to us, like at us, but not with us. And so when he had to do that with perfect strangers, knowing my experience now, he was targeting people who he thought would listen, and so it's interesting. Some people will portray themselves of a higher status, but haven't done the actual work to get that level of I don't know, status. That's all I can say. It's like, whatever, like wealth, money, numbers, and I remember growing up thinking it was important to have friends, and my dad promoted us to join all the clubs because that's what he did in high school, and like he really was trying to relive his life through us, and it put us in a very pressured point because I didn't have the same values as he did. There are things that he held in high regard that I did not, and knowing what I know now, I don't want the numbers with the people because I'm looking for quality, not quantity. And so the people that I've come into contact with that are really friendly in the face but backstabbing to my back, they have had a lot of numbers. But the numbers that they have, like when you look at people and you see who they're connected to, like willingly connected to these people, there's one thing, like if you're in a workplace, you have to be civil and work with people, but there were people in a workplace, I remember this, where I'm like, why are you willingly spending time with that person either outside of work or in your free time at work? Like it was really, I'm like, can you not see who she is? And the fact that you can't see who she is now, that concerns me. And so I used to put that person, because he was charming and friendly and funny and charismatic, I used to think, oh, that he's fun to be around, which he was, but his value system was shot to shit. He tried to portray himself as an empath, and he tried to portray himself as a daughter dad, and meaning he prioritizes, he's very empath or emotionally available to his daughter. He always talked about his daughter, barely talked about his son, so she was the golden child. And interesting enough, his son was very similar to him. He's raising his son to live his life of working in a factory and do sort of like laboring work. Even though this man was an artist and he made money from being an artist, he really still stayed stuck in the factory world and really was trying to encourage his son to do the same thing, and couldn't wonder why his son was like feeling really deflated and depressed at home. And it's like, well, you're trying to push him into your lifestyle. You're not happy in it. Why do you think he would be? Right? And it's really weird because like parents really try to push you into their path. But like for me, I want my kids to do different and better. I want my kids to have their own business. I want them to have their own life. I don't want to push them into having kids too soon, because kids isn't the answer for everybody. And kids can be great, but kids can be stressful if you're not set up to have kids. And I also want them to understand like what you need to be able to offer kids to really offer them that safety and security. And it's not just about having a bunch of kids and feeding them dinner at the table and like taking them to sports. Like there's more of a more connectivity that is required to really bring up a stable, secure human. And so there are things that are shadow aspects, are things that were done in haste instead of with patience and kindness. That's what I believe, because the things that I'm having to develop in me now that I needed as a child all require me to be kind to myself, speak kindly to myself, give myself time to learn, time to rest, time to do it over and over, time to find my answers and not just take on someone else's opinions, and trust my intuition. When I feel like this is wrong, I'm allowed to say, I give myself permission to move away from people instead of feel like pressure to stay around others. Even though I've been on this journey of looking for my crew, I've almost gotten to the situation where I'm like, I just don't want to. It feels like a chasing energy. Like maybe I'm not going to chase anymore. Maybe I'm just fine with me and myself and my dogs and my kids. You know, that's kind of like being okay with that. And so shadow aspects are things like that you do out of habit from being a child. So in order to get attention, I had to be cooperative. You know, I got the most attention when I was cooperative, and I got the most negative attention when I didn't catch on to things. I got negative attention when I spoke out for myself. You know, I got negative attention when I wasn't conforming. And so you get positive attention, if anything. To be honest, I don't remember getting positive attention. The only positive attention I remember is getting Sundays after Dad yelled at us. When Dad was in a good mood, that's when we got, you know, he needed us to be in a good mood. So that's not positive attention. That's like reading the room. So I don't actually remember getting any sort of like positive reinforcement. Even now, about a month or so ago, my dad had sent me something around my birthday, and it was a package, and it was actually closer to Father's Day, surprise, surprise, than my birthday. But my birthday is at the end of June, but he sent it a week before Father's Day, which is interesting. And you know, it was hard for him to mention because he had said he'd seen my yard on Google, whatever, view or whatever, which is a lie. I know he drives around my house. I already know that. It's what he does. It's what he's been doing. He drops by people unannounced all the time. He's just not allowed to do that anymore because I will call the police on him if he tries to do that. So when and it's so interesting because then he'll write me things. I did a video on this, but he'll write like we're just good friends and there's been no damage by him. But what the part I'm referring to in that letter was like, oh, I see you have a knack for gardening. Like he can't just come out and say things and give me like a full blown on compliment. Like, wow, I love what you've done with your yard. It's like, it's almost like he's like it's gotta come from him and his approval. He can't just make a statement like, yeah, you're really talented there. Like you're really good. Because I've had perfect strangers come up and be like, wow, like they don't hide their enthusiasm. They're like, yeah, I really like what you're doing out there. And it's nice to hear that. And I'm not used to hearing it, so it's sometimes it's awkward because I'm just like, okay, like I feel like this is weird because I'm not used to receiving compliments, to be honest, and unless they're from strangers. It's just weird. And I've gotten compliments in the past only because they were expecting something in return, whether it be a compliment and or something from me, right? So like they offer that, but he's looking for something else. He's offering me a compliment about the garden, but he's looking for me to reach out for him for Father's Day so I can tell him he's a good father. He's hoping I'm still emotionally attached to him, and I'm not. And so these shadow aspects, you know, for his shadow aspects, like he can't acknowledge he's wrong. He can't say, like, I was an abusive father, because somehow he loses some sort of merit somewhere in this world, and he has to take himself off this pedestal that he has put himself on, you know? And it's not like other people. Here's the thing with shadow aspects: when you're around balanced people, they can see you for who you are. Just give them a little bit of time. I'm getting good at recognizing this, you know, quite quickly. And there are times when I feel bad for people, and I'm recognizing if I feel bad, don't do it, don't connect. So I'm getting better. Like you retrain your brain. But because of my childhood, where I was required to ignore my father's bad behavior, and I had to look at him like he was higher than high, because that was my survival. And so in life, it's been my pattern to look up at men like they're, you know, of some sort of like status symbol. And in reality, all the men that I've connected with have been quite less than, like really disappointing, really like weak-minded, addicted to porn, and not even trying to do anything about it, just like entitled, like this is what, you know, porn's out there, so we're allowed to watch it. Like, okay, I mean, sugar's on the shelves. That doesn't mean you have a sugar, you know, diet. Sugar is still harmful. You know, you can buy cigarettes, and that doesn't mean just because everyone's smoking cigarettes and just because, you know, they're available for sale, that doesn't make it good for you. You know, so like some people will put up whatever reasoning as to why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't care who it hurts. You know, like it's like I have a neighbor across the road. I'll be out in the garden, I can smell his cigarette smoke, but he doesn't care. It's not like it's his cigarette. And I remember visiting someone recently up in their apartment, and this person just leaves their door open while they smoke cigarettes. And it's in the apartment that I was visiting. I could smell the smoke in there, and that person is an elderly person, so we're supposed to feel sorry for them. And in reality, it's super selfish to be smoking and throwing your butts on the ground, and you know, expecting people to inhale the smoke. Like it makes me sick. That smell makes me sick. I used to be a smoker, and I quit when I had kids. So like I also don't understand, like when you have kids and you decide not to quit smoking. And it's not just about how the smoke affects the kids. It's like, don't you want to be around a long time to be around your kids? Like, I just don't know. I just don't understand that mindset. And so shadow aspects, I do feel, are like excuses we make for ourselves in order to almost like self-soothe and tell ourselves like you're safe, you're okay. Because remember, your body wants to keep you stuck and safe, meaning not doing anything different. You don't want to exert any extra energy. And so these changes that you're needing to make are going to be uncomfortable. It's like going to the gym and working out after a few years. Like you remember what it was like when you were working out regularly, and so like when you go start again and it's not happening as fast as you thought it's like, whoa, what's going on here, right? And it's hard, and you can't just give up working out. You have to keep at it and rest and recover and go again, and like, and then moderate. And so the same has been with my shadow aspects, where it's like I had a lack of boundaries with people, because I was raised with people who did not think of me and my boundaries. They had to be invasive of my privacy. They had to micromanage. They had to, you know, when I was getting too big, knock me down, because God forbid your kids do better than you. And then being raised with competitive siblings as well, like, you know, we all had to compete for a father's attention and a mother's attention, who were totally checked out and probably never should have had kids until they fixed themselves first, right? And so, like, while my father has narcissistic traits, he also has some very solid traits. Like, he was hardworking. He was a very hardworking man. But unfortunately, if you are hardworking, but you still have that sort of like lack of boundaries and respect for my needs and what you know, he would just want to show up and visit. And being a single parent, I had limited energy. And so the kids are my priority, not my father. And he couldn't understand that. He couldn't understand how he couldn't just drop by. I don't care what your house looks like. I care what it looks like, because I had family members that would judge me based on the status of my situation in my house. Like, if it was messy, like that's what they talk about behind closed doors. That's what they use to bump themselves up to make themselves feel bigger, and passively aggressively drop me down. and judge me. And a lot of things, a lot of my weaknesses and vulnerabilities were used against me and turned against me. And I had to be careful where I was doing that in life too, you know. And but at the same time, it's interesting when I try to talk to these issues about these people, they would always turn it around and make it like I was the problem and I was, you know, well, you do that too. Well, you know what? If I was doing that, why didn't you talk to me about it? You never talk to me about it. So when I try to call people out on their bullshit, their shadow aspects, they like to try to turn the tables on me, and always we were always talking about me and never talking about them. And if we tried to talk about them, they got loud, they got aggressive, they tried to humiliate me, and they tried to, well, you're not any better. You're doing, you know, you had kids with a, you know, they believe that because I had kids with a man out of marriage and because it was very spontaneous and due to casual sex, I deserve everything I got from that man. The financial abuse, the abandonment. Well, why have kids with someone you don't know? Well, it's just because you don't know that person, they're still required to be a father figure. You don't think everyone's gonna be like, it wasn't like I thought he was just gonna walk away from his kids. You know, you learn to expect less for yourself, but you just never think that person's gonna drop those kids. Like that kind of person to be a deadbeat dad, that's a low, you gotta go pretty selfish and low for that, to not want to let that situation motivate you to become a better dad for your kids. Like you really have to, and like, you know, I wasn't ready for kids, neither was the kid's dad, but at the same time, like, you know, I wasn't, you know, I'm still working on myself for my kids. I still have shadow aspects I'm working on. And you know, some of these, I think that's part of the frustrating part from my parents is like, they've been like this for so long. And I thought, you know what, give them a chance after, you know, it can be a challenging to change when you have parents, or sorry, kids to care for. So I thought maybe after they'll take time, you know, even if they have to work a full-time job, they have like the weekends and the nights and they can sit and reflect. And it never happened. It never happened. And because it's a selfish behavior. They care more about them than me, and giving me some sort of peace of mind and admitting, you know what, I did this happened when you're a child. I remember this happened and I ignored it, and I did not stand up for you and fight for you like I should have, you know. Or, you know, I really used you as an emotional punching bag because I didn't know how to manage my emotions, and I felt insecure and incomplete and small myself, and so I used my kids to try to step on them and suppress them so I would feel bigger. And that's how I rocked, and that's how I was. And you don't get this, you know. You don't get this from these people, and those are shadow aspects. And the thing is with shadow aspects, like, it's something that you learned as a child, and it doesn't have to be you. Like, you have choices. So like when I was a prey to a predator, I had to learn, like, I gotta do different. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy standing up for myself. I'm still working on it. I'm still revising it. I've been practicing it over and over and over. I'm getting better, but I'm not completely there. And so, you know, it's really frustrating when you see people make all these excuses as to why they can't do what, you know. Like I said, like substances abuse and things, like there's now I don't have all the information. I know my addictions and what has held me in there, and I'll do a video about that. I think drug abuse can be very for different reasons. I think, I don't know, but to me I would assume like that something extreme has happened, and yeah, so, but I don't know. I don't know. Like, I'm just speaking based on my experiences with addiction and substances, like things like screen time, even having like a lustful connection with someone where I thought it was love and it was just lust. And I had to realize like that's what it was. It could be spending money, you know, Amazon, spending money on things that I thought, because like you know, I feel so unhealthy, so let's buy some supplements, when in reality, if I just change my lifestyle, I don't need those supplements. So like these things drop off when you start to change your life. And so what I was trying to say is like, your shadow aspects can be changed if you want to change them, but you got to be able to look at the blind spot that you're avoiding, the painful truth that you don't want to tell yourself. Like, living in delusion, like some children had to live in delusion of who their parents were in order to survive the reality of the situation, because you recognize you're living with a very predatory monster, and you're expected, like, you're not allowed to just be authentic and be like, F you, dad, I think you're an asshole, and I think you're super selfish, and I know you're abusing our mother, and you know what, like, I know that you're messed up and doing all these horrible things to your family. And then you pretend like you're just some sort of like misguided, oopsie kind of individual. That's not what that was. And you still can't come to terms with it. I had to look at my kids, and even because I've had reactional abuse, I still, that's a form of abuse to them. So when I would like get so much things thrown on me by these people that claim to care from me or for me while I was trying to like improve my life, it's like anytime I tried to improve my life and got something good, they wanted to ruin it for me, you know, and or take what I had created for myself and kind of give it to themselves. It's like, it's really weird. It's like people have ideas for your house when they don't live in it. They like to tell you how to, like, what, how to, you know, it's like the colors, like you should paint it like this, and you should, and that's really weird because we're different people with different tastes. Why would I, you know, it's like you painted your house, yeah? Okay, so like now you want to paint my house too. Like that's a weird like control issue, right? And so there are things where I have to like I was micromanaging my kids, but there's ways like I do it. I tell them like, well, this has helped for me when I organize my space. So I'm not telling them necessarily how. I can give them suggestions because they're not used to doing it, but I'm also stepping back and saying like, this is how this could be useful. This could. Here's something that I think could help your space. There's no pressure. Take it or leave it. I don't care. And leaving them that space to be like, you know what? I don't like this. And I'm like, that's cool. It's not a passive aggressive, okay, well, I guess. It's not that. It's like, you know what? That's cool. I was just trying to help. This is what I found. I think this, you know, from my experience that I have more in, this I feel could hit this many marks for your living situation, and that could really help you organize. But also, you know, I find it helpful to have spaces where I put things so I know where to find them, right? So these are things that I've implemented in my life and found useful. It's not me trying to tell my kid like, hey, you should paint your apartment this color, you should put this that way, or you should buy this, or you know, buy that. Like it's different. And even still, like, you know, sometimes they just don't want to hear it, and that's okay too, right? Sometimes kids just want to learn on their own. They don't want to be micromanaged. It's so insulting when you feel like you have to puppet someone, right? And so like kids feel that, and that's a rejection energy all in itself. And so, you know, having people say, well, I did it because I cared for you, you got to explain that to me because I'm not seeing it. I can understand wanting to protect your family members from messing up, but like for me, I want my kids to experience life, the struggle to a certain degree, so they can understand and learn. But then I'm going to be here as a safety net, and I'm still continuing to grow because I still have so much more to learn. And I feel like a lot of parents from my time think that they knew everything, and at the you know, I'll still watch videos on YouTube where they're like, yeah, give them the wooden spoon. I'm like, are you kidding me? You have to hit the behavior into that kid instead of teach them how to do it, which means showing them and leading by example. So a lot of parents, I feel in my time and still in this time, they don't lead by example. They don't even know how to do what they're requiring from this kid. And they're requesting something from these children that they haven't been able to do themselves, and then wondering why their kids are having behavioral issues. And we're not looking at the parents, we're looking at the kids, blaming and pointing at the kids. Like, let's look back at the parents. Let's look back at that, because we are not perfect. And I had to take time to listen to my kids, and it didn't happen overnight, but to listen to what the feedback from my kids about what they don't like about me as in my parent style. And and there were times where they call me out on something, but I said, like, I'm working on that, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I am still unstable for certain things. And my situation has been affected financially by other people outside of me that I couldn't control. And so there are things that, yes, even though I'm trying to be, I've had a number of people, strangers, community members, co-workers, bosses, romantic partners, did I say family? That have outside of themselves, like outside, like they've just targeted. And so it's a lot. It's been a lot to grow and still like stay true to the direction that I'm moving in. But I also have to acknowledge like what that felt like for my kids when I didn't provide. And sometimes I'll offer things up because I'm like, you know what? I realize I did this when you were a kid, and I've experienced this, and I don't like how that feels, and so I want to apologize. And it's not something they've come to me about. It's something I went to them about before they came to me, because I could see it. I had experienced it. I'm like, you know what? This feels like shit. I did this the wrong way. I wish I would have done this better, and I'm going to work on this moving forward. So it's not always necessarily like an apology involved. It's more like I'm recognizing you deserve better from a parent, and I wish I would have done that better. And I know how that feels, or I can imagine how that made you feel. And so I want to do better. And like obviously things take time, and so like there's a time and space that is required, but not in a way to just sit there comfortably and saying, well, I mean, I'll get there when I get there. Like if you're hurting your family, you need to get on that. That's important. That's your foundation, right? That's your family. I think, you know, love and family are used so loosely in ways to control and confuse and manipulate people into staying in toxic dynamics while these individuals choose to do nothing different and have no intention of doing anything different. And so shadow aspects for me is more of a behavior that was developed in childhood, and you have the chance to change that. Now, a lot of people have a problem. I wonder about the shame. There are things like it's hard to admit, like I did something. You know, I remember like emotionally lashing out and yelling at my kids and just, you know, moving furniture or shoving furniture out of the way, or just like, and it would scare them. That, of course, that would scare them. That would scare anybody. And I was just so overwhelmed at the time, and I had so many people coming at me, and that can be an explanation, but in reality, a true balanced parent doesn't react like that when times get tough, because I should have waited, and I didn't know what I didn't know, but at the same time, like I still, even though I didn't know what I didn't know, a true balanced parent doesn't react like that. And so even though I was at the hands of abusers, I had now become the abuser. And so I had to take those actions back in the way that, like, I recognized that was never okay for me to act like that. I don't care what I've experienced or what I went through. I should have never responded like that, because you know what was happening was there was people at work, people outside of me, and it's interesting because these people will abuse you and then discard you and ignore you and not give you a chance to speak your truth to them. And they create that distance for a reason, and they wait for you to try to forget about the bad behavior and come back and like nothing's happened. And in the reality, this is the hard truth where it helps you to stop going back to them, is remember how they treated you and how stressed out they made you and how they abused you, and like what that looked like for you in your life. I took it out on my kids, and while that is my action, they also help put me under that pressure. So I'm not going to go back to those people. If you affected my kids negatively somehow, and you have no sort of remorse and way of like rectifying that, that's a problem for me. And like I'm sorry that I hurt my kids. And so I have to try now there's no way I can undo it, but I can become better. Right? And then I also think of like the chances of, you know, if them having grandchildren, or me having grandchildren and them having kids, like I don't want to be that same reactive parent as a grandparent. So I'm going to change, and I want them to feel that they can rely on me to be a support for their kids if and when the time comes, right? Because at the time, they're seeing me as a ticking time bomb, which is a result of being raised by a ticking time bomb, you know? And continuing that pattern of being prey to, it is prey to a predator. That ticking time bomb is a predator. They only set those time bombs off around people that they know they can do it to. They don't do it to their boss. They don't do it to people that they hold in high status. They save it for the people that, you know, don't have a voice, and that's by design, that you've been raised to not have a voice, you know. And they've also created some sort of exterior mask to the society around them. So even if you were to explain, like, my dad does this, some people might not believe it because he's just so charming. Remember the charming part. And so there are things where I used to give a lot of excuses for people, and I used to be able to see their shadow aspect, and I got to the point where, like, just because I can see it doesn't mean they want to. And, you know, they were looking for my vulnerabilities. They were working on my vulnerabilities. I have a big heart. I still do. I direct it differently. And I no longer, and here's the interesting thing. When you start spending more time by yourself, you get to actually recognize the strength within you, but who you are and who you aren't. And this is a flex, because you know, when you look back on, and it's not in a way of judgment, it's just more in recognition of who is capable of loving and who is not. And it's not only that, it's like who carried on that pattern after. You know, once you've over communicated to somebody how they treat you, there's nothing, you know, and you realize there was no sort of like, how do I do that? You know, oh, I do that? Oh, I didn't know that's how I was coming across. Like, I have not received any sort of conversations of understanding, or remorse to say, you know what, in that time I was stressed as a parent, you know what, me and your mom were not compatible. But at the same time, like, he was, if you're not compatible, that's also not an excuse to break down your partner emotionally, mentally, and physically, and financially. Like, it's really, that's going to be a tough hole to dig yourself out of, because you just really took your anger and misery out on those that were not only closest to you, but that were most vulnerable under you. And this is why I really don't rock with that whole men are leaders thing, because I mean, some men can be leaders and some women are leaders, and a lot of the men in my life have not been leaders, or protective, or caring, or human. They've been cruel and cold, and they wear a charming mask on the outside. And so I've also recognized, I had to recognize women were the same way. And I had women in my family that would pretend to be supportive, but they were not, and they were just so like condescending and controlling, and it made them feel big if they could try to control me, and it made them feel big when I would tell them about the struggles in my life. It wasn't like they were there to help me. They were like, it's almost like that's what they used, you know, for their conversation, because they had no real hobbies or interests of their own. And some of these people will have like their own businesses and things, but they're just still empty on the inside. It's like a bottomless pit where there's no sort of satisfaction or fulfillment there. I don't understand it completely, to be honest. I don't have a chance to describe it now, but I don't know. Like, I know my shadow aspects, and where I don't know. I know the understanding. Like, so for me, at the root of all addiction is attention. You know, of some sort. Like, it's status. If everyone had all the attention in the world that they needed, this world would be a better place. But because like a lot of attention comes with manipulation or like codependency of like getting something to receive something, unfortunately it's a very toxic system in place, where like it's really hard to just meet somebody and enjoy their company and like walk away and just like, you know, I have a lot of people that come at me and they're looking to get something, and it's really gross when you see it, because you're just like, and what did you think you were gonna offer me in return? Like, just your what? And it's just like, it's not even breadcrumbs at this point. It's just a lot of bullshit. What do you do with bullshit? Like, I know I get enough dirt in my yard. I don't need your bullshit that is not going to grow anything. And so shadow aspects, you have to look at them, and like, there is going to be a shame attached to that, but you have to wonder, what is that shame from? Who taught you that kind of shame? I remember like these things that I learned in church, you know, and it's so interesting. Like, there are things that I did because I was people pleasing. There were things I did because I didn't know how to say no. There were things I did because I had a lack of confrontational skills and practice, and I wasn't allowed to be heard or seen at home. And so can you imagine just all of a sudden leaving that family home, and you're out around other people, and now you were told just to go along to get along. You didn't feel like you could say no to anyone, so you just like, my relationships with men were very damaging because they're based on what I learned and how my father treated me. And so I looked, you know, it's true what they say is you look for your father in a partner, which is odd, but it's true, because like that, I didn't know that was my blind spot or my norm. But the shadow aspect too is like tied into like those things that were developed within that dynamic. And so, you know, I looked for men that didn't spend time with me. I looked for men who picked me up off the shelf when they needed me and put me back down when I was no longer of use to them. And so that put me in line with a lot of lusty men. And I was, you know, I didn't have any sort of real contact as a child, like loving, caring, physical connection with my family. And so, you know, you go to look for that in all the other and wrong ways. And so that's challenging. And so since then, I've been able to really understand, like, these men aren't looking for love or connection. They're looking for, you know, impulsive, quick, you know, like a dopamine fix or something. Like, they want somebody to look at them with like gaga eyes and like they're God, and like, and then they just leave them and go find another one. And then they come back to you every once in a while and see if like that addiction has paid off, and now you're, you know, you're addicted to them with that hot and cold energy. And I had that from you know, my family environment. And so things like that, like the people pleasing, like I just kept that I feel like that was developed within the religious community, where it's just like you just constantly forgive and forget. Like, I don't even remember talking about the forget. I think we just forgive, 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 forgive. That's so fucked up. When you forgive the abuser, that's such a messed up dynamic. And it's not to say we don't make mistakes. That's not what this is about. This is bad behavior repeated with no regard to the person that you're hurting, and we're just meant to forgive. And then even the discussion of sins, like, God allows us to sin, we just have to ask for forgiveness. But like, that doesn't mean you can keep on sinning. Once you're aware that you're sinning, you're meant to figure that out, not make excuses like, oh, I just watch porn, that's who I am, I'm a man, that's what men do. That's the same, like, I'm a woman, so I'm a shopaholic. That's just what women do. No, no, it's not. These are unhealthy habits. These are shadow aspects that you're using to fill a void. And some of these shadow aspects are keeping you from living the life that you can love, and in order to love yourself and love life again. And so a lot of people get stuck in these shadow aspects and bad behaviors because it's working for them, and they don't actually have to go internal, and they can kind of skate across the top. Right? You see, it's like a rock that you skip on the surface of the water, and without ever having to go down to the depths and the darkness. And so a lot of people will skip along the top, and this is like toxic positivity. This is, oh, you're so sensitive, it's not that deep. In reality, like, that humiliating overreaction to make someone feel on the spot and like they messed up is actually going to be a huge ticking time bomb. And it's not just a oopsie, it's not just a girl fight, it's that is intentional by a predator who is fearing that she is losing her. And some of these individuals have so much attention, and you just look, you're not even trying to get attention, but you're getting it because you're doing a good job. And so these people will, that's their trigger. You got to look at what, there's a trigger, I believe, that can trigger these shadow aspects. So this can be like jealousy. Like, I used to be really jealous, and I had my ex partners would make me jealous on purpose, trying to trigger me. That's so messed up. Who does that? Who wants someone else to? And I did that when my partner started doing it. When I'm with somebody, I'm like, they're my world, they're my person. That's what I'm focused on. So to think that there's other people, and I know what it feels like to have other people make me feel that way, so I don't want to do that to another person. But some of these, that's what I'm saying, like, when you start to see these things in other people, you're like, okay, that person, I remember this guy, like, he's trying to make me jealous. That's just not, it's not going to work for me, because I don't want to hurt him, and he doesn't care if he's hurting me. And so these are things when you start to work on your shadow aspects, but you can see other people haven't worked on theirs. And maybe I'm confusing a little bit with like addictions with shadow aspects, but I do feel like it's situated in the same, because I do think it's very similar. Like, a lot of people, I've had women that are competitive with me, and like I said, like, one of them was this older lady, and I don't even know why you're competing, because, like, at the time, like, I was more worked out and I had more energy, and she's like, she doesn't take care of herself. There's no real competition. It's like, if we're running a race and you've got asthma and you've got a bad knee, you don't take care of your body, and you don't eat right, and I'm like here, intermittent fasting, doing carnivore, keto, like, why are you even compete? It doesn't, some of these people are just like, I don't even know why you're trying to compete, but they just feel triggered because they feel like they're losing something. And so now they want you to lose something, part of yourself, which is your confidence. And so, when I had to work through the shame for some of these things, I asked myself, sorry, I'm trying to keep this focused, but it's a work in progress. The shame I associate with some of these shadow aspects, like, when I look back and realize I'd made so many bad decisions based on not only bad advice, because I had friends telling me, casual sex, it's no big deal. It's a big deal. It's not fulfilling. And the sex that I've had was never really fulfilling. It's not the sex I would have chosen for me and my partner. It's something that I just did because that's what I thought you did. And a lot of it was really based on pornography, and that is not fulfilling for a woman. It is exciting for a man because it's dominating a woman, and it makes them feel like they're God, and you're just submissive to them. And I have no problem with being submissive, but in these dynamics, it was all about him and not about me. It would be like, that's something, I can honestly say I haven't had good sex with a man where it's connected and it's like satisfying. And that's kind of sad to say, but at the same time, it's just like, that's what they're disconnected. And they probably think like, wow, I'm king shit, but it's like, dude, no, it wasn't like that. And the good things that were involved were me being vulnerable and being intimate and soft. It wasn't about him. Like there was no softness coming from him. It was me leading in that way. So when you lead that way but you don't get it reciprocated, it really leaves you lacking. And so, you know, I've been celibate for a long time, since I think 2022, the summer of 2022. Well, I miss, like, you know, couch cuddles and things like that. That what it comes with is not making me miss the sex, because the sex wasn't that great. Um, it was, some people will convince themselves that sex was great, but it was more of the addictive high of that person coming in and out of your life. And if you would have had that sex with them and they were consistent in your life and you had that sex all the time, you would recognize it for what it was, and that it's very Groundhog Day. It's very lackluster, and it's not creative, and it's not exciting. It's like really kind of like, you know, it's like when you eat too much sugar, you're just like, I don't even like sugar anymore. I don't even know why I was eating that. I don't even like it, you know? And so, yeah, there's just things. Yeah, and I just gave, you know what, you look back and you're just like, you know, when you look back at someone you dated and you're like, what was I thinking? And it's like, I wasn't thinking. I was emotional. I was looking for a codependent connection. I didn't want to be alone. And so I made so many excuses as to like why I'm picking these people, and realizing like, ew, I can't believe I even touched that person. Because it's not like just on the outside. Like I would date some older men and I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? Because these guys aren't even, they're not in shape. They're not attractive. It was the emotional, you know, these men try to connect with you emotionally, and it's emotional manipulation. And I started recognizing that. And at the time, I didn't have self-esteem, so I was picking down, and these men were picking up, if that makes sense. So like I couldn't see my full version of like what I really had to offer. And so it's interesting because I was, you know, always picking less than me, if that makes sense, in the way that like they had less to offer as a partnership, as a person, for authenticity and integrity, and they were always aiming up. And it never lasted because I wouldn't tolerate it for that long. Like there were times that I was confused for a while, but once you get out of that confusion, you're just like, why was I doing that? And you're like, oh, this is how I was required to be as a child, so that's who I grew up to be as an adult. And so you start looking at your past patterning, and like I said, like in one of my other videos, like I would feel bad for men and want to help fix them. But in reality, these men like didn't want to be fixed, for one. For two, they weren't even, a lot of them weren't even, didn't think they had to be fixed. So there was like a lot of entitlement there. And a lot of them had no problem, even though they were like less attractive and less desirable and less optimal, like just as a person, like they would still be cheating with other women because they had that immaturity and that insecurity where they needed more to feel like more, but they were less. And it wasn't because of the people they were around, it's because of the lack of work they did on the inside. And so I learned a lot, and I've actually learned a lot to, you know, what's interesting is like a lot of these shadow aspects I had and have and work on, like it's so important for me to not only share these with my kids and my, so that at one point, like, you know, when your kids are doing stuff and you don't approve of it, and you're talking down to them and saying you shouldn't do that, and you're kind of judging their behavior, like, you know, you're better than that, you're this. But then when I look back and I'm like, I might have done worse. So here I am trying to tell my kid not to experience life and judging them and making them feel like less than. But I'm like, dude, I did worse at my age. So you know what? I am not saying one thing. I care about you and I want you to treat yourself with respect, but you got to do you. And if this is what you feel is best for you, like I'm here, I'm not going to promote it, but I'm also going to talk about my experience and why I did something similar and what I did, so that you can learn from that and understand maybe that's why you're doing what you're doing. And so it's not like a judgment. It's more like we connect based on our experiences. I mean, you have to be vulnerable for that. You have to understand as a parent, you don't know everything. You don't know a lot. A lot of these parents and adults are walking around like just because they're a certain age that they have wisdom attached with that age, and they've been working the same job, living the same life since high school. But because they've lived in a town longer, they have more rights, more wisdom. Maybe they know people, and like that gives them, like, it's so weird when you think about how some people put themselves up on pedestals. And so something I also had to do with my kids is give them something and recognize, what didn't I receive as a child that I needed, and I have to give to myself now. So I didn't give myself permission to grieve, to speak, to be seen. I didn't give myself permission to hate, because there were times when I hated my parents. There was times when I hated my father. And it doesn't mean I have to be a hateful person. It just means that's an emotion, and I have to acknowledge that that emotion is in there in order to release it. And a lot of people don't like that idea, but like, you have to admit, like, I hated you in that moment, even though I didn't know what I knew or didn't know. I still felt hate. So like, you if you're internalizing that, you have to get that out and wonder, why am I hating myself? You know? And then there's things like it's just I mean, it's more complicated than that, but there's things that I had to recognize where, like, and then so there's things that for my kids I had to also, there are times where I'm like, I don't want to bug my kids because I feel like they don't want to be around me right now, but at the same time, some things need to be said. And if you wait too long, it makes it harder to say, you know, and it kind of loses its weight. And because that's the thing, a lot of people never came back to me to apologize or express remorse or show change behavior. So what I had to do was recognize, like, okay, I'm doing the same thing because I'm not being emotionally available to my kids, because I feel like it's uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable for them, but it was uncomfortable for me. So I had to. And now I do this sometimes. I'm better with texting because I can write it out, and it gives them something to hold on to and go over and go back to. Some people might say that's empty, but I also feel like when I text it, I can get my thoughts out. I can edit it so it's more focused towards them and not like based on excuses and things. But it's also takes out my emotional sadness and makes it more about the logical reality of the situation, so that they're not getting distracted by my tears and feeling bad for me when they need to be receiving, like, that acknowledgement that I heard them, right? Oh, I'm still working through that one. So if you can't recognize what you're missing and what you didn't receive, then you can't give that to your kids. And so, like, there's a big void there. And some people, like, wonder why my kids have estranged from me and why my kids don't want to be around me. Well, like, you need to acknowledge some painful truths there. And if it's not your own pain, in order to recognize their pain. So if you can't recognize that you're in pain, then you can't recognize the pain that you're putting through other people through. You've got a blind spot. You've got shadow aspects, right? And so when I did more of this work, it started out with recognizing who was hurting me. Then I had to recognize when they were out of the picture, I was hurting me and mine. And then I had to recognize, why was I doing these things? What created these patterns? What are these patterns? What triggers these patterns? And then I had to build myself up from there as well. And so, like I said, I had to acknowledge I am a parent, but my kids know a lot too. And they actually recognized this man that I dated on and off for 8 years. Todd, they recognized him very soon after we were dating, and they knew for a long time that he was not good for me, and I ignored that. And I wish I would have listened to them, because it affected the time that I didn't spend with my kids, and it really took my time and energy to recover from the abuse that he put me through. Because it wasn't just me. What he did to me affected my kids, and that's why these are people that I will never go back to. Because it's me who recovered from it. There's a lot of people who have been abused and will never recover from that. So some people will say, well, look what you did, look where you are now. Well, no, that's the work I did. I did that work. I took the time out. I had to invest in myself. I had to pay my bills and rest. I had to take hits. I had to pay my mortgage with money instead of fixing my house, because I had to rest and recover from these abusive people, family, partners, relationships, romantic, community members, social services. I had to take my time to rest and recover, because I kept coming up against these people time after time after time, with not the exception. You just don't expect to find these situations in all these areas. And so I just had to keep learning and recognizing and experiencing. And it's like, wow, it's taken a lot. It's taken a toll on my finances. And so, like, that's why it's like, shadow aspects, yes, we can all change, yes, but there are some people that just are not meant to come back into your life, no matter what work they do. Like, do it for you and yours, but don't do it to come back. There is an expiry date for me on certain people. And they're like, if you're not family, don't even bother. Don't even bother. If you're family and you've been doing the work and you've done the work and you know that you're better and that's one thing I could have conversations with that. Um, but there's times, like I said, I just got a letter from my dad, and he has not changed one bit, and he's still trying to portray himself as some sort of like, woe is me, I'm only this poor boy who is trying to do the best that he can in this hard life, and you know what, yeah, I made some mistakes, but no, you were an abuser, father. That's who you were. And unfortunately, I have to, he really affected my mom, but at the same time, she really protected him too. So she's an enabler of his abuse. And while I understand it's challenging to move kids out, it wasn't just like while we were, under the ages of 20, like even after the fact, she still partnered up with another man who was very similar to my father, and just different in some ways, but very similar in a lot of other ways. And she still chose him. And I mean, there's nothing I can do for that. Do I want to help her? I would, but at the same time, like, you can't help when these people are attached to these other people. You can't do anything because they bring it along. It's like the messy wagon, you can't help someone who's still attached to these trauma bonds. It's not going to work out, unfortunately. And so you leave your hands tied. But so working through the shame was a big one. It's like looking back and like having to accept things that you did for the wrong reasons, and not getting stuck in the resentment, and understanding, like, you know what, if you get stuck in the resentment, that means you got to keep going, because now you're blaming them for, yes, they tricked me, they did trick me, but it's also a chance for me to recognize that I was not raised to ask hard questions and hold people accountable. And so that's what I've learned to do since then, and I'm getting better at that too. So like, that's the silver lining. And so, like, if you get stuck in resentment, that's a sign that you just have more growing to do, and you got to keep it pushing, and you got to find out, how can I prevent this from happening? What do I need to change within me? Because there's people that you recognize. I recognize the abuse in them. Okay, so what is the abuse in me? Why am I tolerating this behavior? Why am I signing up with people without asking these hard questions? What makes me so impulsive and emotionally attached to these individuals without even really knowing anything about them? Like, I had to go in and ask, and it was embarrassing to recognize, like, it's so easy. At some points, it was so easy for me to just fall for someone I didn't even know, and I'm like, what am I doing? And so, like, I got out of the romantical part of that, and so, like, I was in a phase where I'm like, well, maybe I can just start off making friends. And it was still, I'm just like still attracting these people that are just not on an equal playing field. They just haven't done the work, but they want to pretend that they're a player. And it's so, like, the challenging part with that is, like, these people will never give you. That's the thing. There is a type of there's people out there like you that are trying to heal, and there's ones that are so stuck in their shadow aspect that they're just never going to heal, and so they like to play different roles. And so you'll see that it's kind of like the kid with their shoes sticking out of the curtain at the bottom. Like, they think you can't see them, but, like, we can see you. It's not my job anymore to start calling this shit out. I don't need to over communicate. I didn't need to call you out. Like, your shadow aspects, those are yours. Those are not mine. I don't need to deal with that. Now, I have been able to use people in my environment when I first started doing this to remind me and be like, okay, like, this is triggering me for some reason. Why? So, like, when I would see women that were more put together and had nicer clothes and a better body and better hair and a bigger house, I would be like, wow, like, what the heck? Like, I feel so triggered by that, and I feel less than. And I had to realize, well, I can work out. I can improve my hair health. What was affecting my health? The people around me, and the codependency, and the excuses, and the belief systems that I was raised with that keep me so stuck in life, where, waiting for someone to save me, like God. Like, it's not that I don't believe, like, something's out there, but if you're waiting for God to save you, you're going to be waiting a long time. That's not, in my belief system, that's not how God works. Like, God helps you when you take action. So if you're just waiting there, and you're just like partying, and you're drinking, and you're avoiding, and you're eating all, you're living your life to the fullest, that's not an environment for God to grow, in my opinion. Like, you're in self-destruct. Like, what are we gonna do with that? You gotta be receptive and open to change. You are still in your destructive phase. And when I see people still, like I said, when I see people, like, I smoked in high school, and I quit when I found out I was pregnant. I was a big drinker in high school, but and in my 20s I was, but when as soon as I got pregnant and had the kids, it really dropped off. And the only time I drank was really because I thought like that's what I was supposed to do, like that's what people do. That's how they unwind, because I was living with the predator. So like it was really a numbing agent and a suppressant to what was actually happening in my home. And if I would have let my full self fly out without all these numbing things, it would have got me where I was going faster. So a lot of these things can keep you stuck in these shadow aspects, and they're kind of tied all together, these bad behaviors and these substance abuse. Like, so when I see someone who's still smoking at the ripe old age of my age, that's a red flag for me. Like, smoking's bad for you. So what happens with the other things that you're kind of questionable about? So there's gray areas where, we don't know for sure if these things are damaging to your health. So like, but if you can't even quit the cigarettes, if you can't even quit the drinking, that to me is that, like, if you're still drinking to the point where you're stumbling, slurring, this is like a form of fun for you. To me, it's just, my belief system is it's not fun. I feel like shit when I was smoking when I was younger. When I had my kids, I was young then, and I felt like shit then. So I can't imagine smoking for that period of time, that making you feel good. When I drank, my last drink was, I think, in 2021, no, 2022, the Christmas of 2022, and I felt like shit. Actually, maybe it was around then. It might have been because I remember I had some beers when I was doing some renovations. I would have beers while I was renovating because it would help me get through the renovation. In reality, I needed to learn how to make money so I can pay someone else who really loves to renovate to do the work, right? So it's like, and that was at the age of, that was in my early 40s. But the drinking was like, I could count. It was maybe 1 to 3 times a year, if that. And even though it wasn't a lot, I wasn't slurring, but I had a buzz, I still felt like shit. So when I see these people like drinking to the point of like, like it's poison. It's poison to your body, and you're drinking to the point where you're blacking out, or you're stumbling, or you're slurring. That to me that's a red flag. That's like a immaturity to me, because you're not valuing your health. And then, which means you can't value your wealth because you're not in a position to be consistent with your health, to, you know what I mean? And so now, like, why would I work with that? That's not something I can work with. And I also look at who people hang out with. What direction are they going in? Because why would you hang out with people who are going into the ditch when you want to stay on the road? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And while some people may say, well, it sounds cold. Well, you know what's cold is connecting with charming people who backstab you, and you have to recover from that. These people are not there for your recovery. They're there to use and abuse you. And when shit hits the fan, which it will, because these people are toxic and they're not willing to grow, because they think about if they've been doing these things, really affect your health negatively. They're not like things that happen, like, so insulin resistance, I used to have so much sugar and shit like that, but I wasn't overweight. So I'm like, this isn't affecting me, right? Because you associate diabetes with a spare tire around the waist. So I'm like, I must be fine. But in reality, my hair was falling out, and I had a lot of issues with my gut health. And so something was happening. And I was losing my hair on the top here. My hair was more brittle. My roots were really oily. Like, my health hair is improving. It's not there yet. But like, I noticed something was happening, and that was just on it. So like, you got to understand, some people, when they're so overly invested in some of these substance abuse issues, you're just like, that is what you're ignoring. This is like, there's a red light flashing at this point. It's not just kind of like a yellow light, like, hey, slow down on those drinks, slow down on that substance. This is like, dude, like, you're doing some serious damage here. And so like, for me, like, I've had to care for people all my life. Why would I want to care for more people who are irresponsible with their health and not working to manage it? And some people will say, we're doing it. Well, okay. Well, I mean, like I said, like, I am responsible for me. You're responsible for you. And like, your results are your results, but mine are mine. And like, sometimes you're just driven more than other people. And so it's not your responsibility to hang back. And that's one of my shadow aspects, is I wanted to fix people. I wanted to help people. Because at one point I needed help and no one helped me. So I know what that feels like, to be stuck in life and feeling like it's hopeless. But I had to change my mind. I had to change my life. Nobody's doing it for me. Am I getting support here and there? Yes, I am. But at the same time, some of those support systems come with abusers in the environments, because people don't know what to look for, or they're too afraid to call it out, or they make it like it's no big deal because it's not part of their everyday life. You know, they just kind of, it's not. But when you've experienced this in real life, often those little things become big things, and in reality, they're not just the gray zone. You know, it's actually becomes the very black darkness of these dynamics. And so, I had to. I know I keep talking about the shame because I think that's important for people to like think that I'm getting off topic, but the shame is really a part of it, of our shadow aspects, because it's like, what happens if we acknowledge, you know, like when you ask yourself why you're doing something, you're gonna get the answers, and you're maybe not gonna like those answers, and then it's not gonna be something like, and then you got to change direction, and that's gonna be hard because you could have been, you know, like, so like let's just say like something you do is like you eat sweets all the time and you have coffee like 3 times a day. To stop that, all of a sudden people are gonna notice, and then you're gonna have to be like, well, I've been doing this for years, and all of a sudden I stopped. And so like there's going to be some sort of explanation. You're going to think you have to, and there shouldn't be, because you're going to be healthier. And some people are like, I could never quit coffee. Well, good. Do you know how bad caffeine is for you if you've experienced trauma in your life? Do you know how bad sugar spikes your cortisol in your nervous system when you've already experienced so much betrayal and trauma? So like me, I don't want to stop caffeine and coffee, but I also recognize when I had caffeine in my system, I overrode my natural body's ability and my like my basic energy store, and then I pushed my body too hard because I didn't feel like I was good enough, and I had to do too much. And so there are times when you have to look at, why are you consuming the thing that you're consuming, in order to like do different, and also get the logic in front of the emotion. And some of that emotion can be fear, shame, blame, you know, comfort, delusion. Like, I don't actually want to let go. Like, sometimes I just had to be honest and be like, I don't want to quit coffee today. So sometimes you got to sit there and drink the coffee until you get the effects. But like, I don't know, some people have pushed past that point, and I don't understand. I don't know what that feels like. I mean, I do know in some of my experiences where I can't make certain changes because other things need to happen first. I do feel like there is kind of like a puzzle version of it, to where like a, if my life sucks, there's going to be, I'm going to be eating sugar, I'm going to be eating carbs, I'm going to be, like, I was doing all these things. And so not only had to change my life, but I had to learn how I looked at life and my expectations out of life and how long that was going to take. And so there's a lot of things in my belief systems I had to revise, but also a lot of life changes I had to make. And then once I started recognizing, like, if I continue consuming sugar, I am going to be tired. It affects my body horribly. It makes me swell. It holds on to, it's like water retaining. It holds on to fat. And so like, these are things I do value getting in shape, because when I feel strong, I feel good. And when I can just fit into an outfit, I don't have to think twice about it if I look like a potato or not. Judge me if you want. I really don't give a shit, but it makes me feel good to, and it's not like there's specific outfits. There's just clothes that I like to wear, and I don't like feeling all this extra weight on me. It feels like it's getting in my way. That's just me. And when my muscles are toned and tight, I feel strong and I feel good and I feel straight and in alignment. So those are things that I get from exercise. You know, and to be honest, in this ways, the way the world is right now, I mean, to have my muscle and my energy and my strength seems like a no fail. Like, why wouldn't you do that right now when things are so upside down and crazy? I think it's important not only just to have it for so I have more hours in the day to achieve my goals, but like it's also a way to protect myself, but it's also a way to play, because I like playing soccer and I like playing sports. So there's not just a one thing, but you got to start, your whys have to get stronger than your excuses. And some people just have so many excuses that they're still so stuck in there. And so the shadow aspect can be like, what are your excuses? Why are you telling yourself like this doesn't need to be done yesterday? And it's not to say like you're behind, because it's better to do it late than never. And you got to be careful not to compare yourself, because I like to tell my kids when they're doing stuff, like, they'll kind of be hard on themselves, and I'm like, dude, like, so many adults are not doing this right now, and you're in your 20s and you're doing it. And yes, there are some kids that have been doing what they're doing maybe when they're 10 or 12, but I need my kids to focus on, like, at least you're starting. So if this is you and you're struggling, and I know it's been a long video and I apologize, I'll try to do a revised video later. But if you are struggling right now with your shadow aspects and you feel like these are your distractions, these are what are keeping you stuck from the life that you deserve. And sometimes you don't think it's possible when you look around and see people doing it and you say, well, I can't do that because I don't have this. Well, what if these people, you know what, some people are doing stuff and they didn't get there the right way, but what if you get there the right way? Maybe you've got something you've been developing even amongst those shadow aspects, like resiliency. And while you can tolerate certain things, that means you can tolerate sacrificing certain things in your life to get the life that you want to live. And so it's just a matter of sitting there by yourself and really looking at your life and really making some hard choices. What do you actually want in life? And I had to also recognize what was making me feel anxious. So when I was in debt, I felt anxious. When I was doing things in my life because of other people, because I felt I had to tiptoe around them, that made me feel anxious. When I have to shrink myself in certain rooms and environments, that makes me feel anxious. And I'm so tired of feeling like I have to be small. You know, one of these areas is like feeling like I don't deserve support because I have experienced abuse, but because some people don't think I look like I've been abused, that they think, well, you're not, it's not that bad. You don't really deserve that much support. Do you really need support? Like, do you really need this? Because, like, you look at these people over here, they're way worse. And it's like, well, and because I choose healthy choices instead of, you know, falling on substance abuse issues, because I have a choice in there, doesn't mean I have not been abused. It's so interesting. Some people will, like, have a lot of very set ways on who's abused and who's not. It's kind of like, you know, when you see people who have handicaps, they assume, well, you're not in a wheelchair, so you can still walk, so you should be fine. Well, some people can't walk for long periods of time before maybe fainting, or maybe they can't withstand the heat. You know, like, you never know. There's just things that you just don't know about. And so that's something I've also had to work through, is not caring what people think. And I had to push past some of those. I feel like those shadow aspects also came from other people, but then also affected my mind and what I believed I deserved. So I had to believe that I deserve support too, because I was letting these people get in my head, and it got to the point where I just don't even want to be in some of these environments now, because it just, I don't know, it's just like there's so many things that like you know what, sometimes I just don't want to say hi to people. And now I'm kind of like, you know, when you start seeing people for who they are, and like the fact that you've had to speak your truth a number of times and they still ignore it, it's draining, it's exhausting. And I'm not your parent, and I'm not your friend. And so yeah, there's a lot of painful truths that have to happen for you to work through your shadow aspects and work through the shame, and understand that that shame is not necessarily always coming from us, but it has come from someone else first, that they have placed on you. And there's a good chance they have that situation for themselves and they're judging themselves harshly. And so I had to give myself softness when I had cruelty from other people, and I had to recognize that I was being cruel to myself as well. So that's the judgment, that's the blame. That's, you got to figure, I focus on forgiving myself first. I'm not working on forgiving anybody else. Nobody else has changed their behavior. Nobody else has come at me with any sort of remorse or sort of you know, what do you call that, to you know, refill the cup that they knocked over. Nobody has, like, out of all the things that affect my kids, this is all the people that I've dealt with that have been abusive and cruel and bullying. When you affect me, you affect my kids, and when you affect my life, you take time from what I get to do in my life. So, like, if you can't give that back to me in some way, that's what are you doing? Like, that's just focus on you and yours at this point, right? And so yeah, there's a lot of people that are trying to make you feel bad so that you feel low and you feel less than, and that makes you controllable, and that keeps you in your emotions. And if you're in your emotions, then people can control you. And so you see, the shadow aspects are actually a really important part of this. So sorry that was so long. Hopefully it was helpful. I'll try to do, you know, there's a certain number of things that I'm focused on that have helped me grow and learn and become better. And so, like, I'm going to get better at revising these so it's more digestible and not such a long-winded spew, but I'm not there yet. So hopefully that was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.